something no one wants to say out loud. Most addicts aren't chasing pleasure. They're running from the void. And so are you. You just use prettier excuses. Work, food, screens, control. But the whole is the same. Addiction doesn't begin with the substance. It begins when something inside you breaks, and no one notices. When you stop feeling alive, but your body keeps going. That's where the hunger is born. A hunger not of the flesh, but of the soul. And it can't be fed with anything from the outside. No one becomes an addict because they want to destroy themselves. They become addicts because, at some point, they lost all meaning, and anything that imitates it for a second is enough to breathe one more day. Think about this. It's not the drug that consumes them. It's the silence that takes over their chest when they're sober. That unnamed anguish, that echo that only disappears when the substance enters, but never for long. And so the cycle begins. Pleasure, relief, guilt, emptiness. Repeat. Until what they once used to escape becomes their cage, and the soul shatters. People think the addict is weak. The truth is harsher. It's someone who tried to fill the abyss with whatever they could grab and got swallowed whole. You know what's most dangerous? They might be right next to you, or inside you, and you still haven't called it by its name. There's something the textbooks never say. The addict is not broken. He is searching. Maybe he doesn't know for what. Maybe his search is clumsy, destructive, dirty. But it's there, burning, like a prayer without words. That's what Jung saw before anyone else. Addiction is not the enemy. It's the signal, the final cry of a soul that refuses to give up. That's why he played such a crucial role in the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill Wilson understood, thanks to a letter from Jung, that it wasn't about controlling the addict, but about allowing them to be born again. Not with rules, with meaning. Because it's not the substance that kills, it's the absence of meaning. And no one is saved by obedience. Transformation only happens when something inside explodes and demands a different life. The addict doesn't need sermons. They need to be seen, not for what they do, but for what they're desperately seeking among the ruins. And what they seek is not the drug. It's redemption. It's coming home. It's the need to feel that beneath all their filth, a spark still remains unextinguished. What we call addiction is just symbolic language, a language of the unconscious, a warning, a dark way of saying, something inside you was exiled, and it's trying to return. That's why sometimes it has no name. It's a shapeless void, a loss that was never spoken. It's not an excuse. It's not romanticism. It's real. And if you ignore the message, the symptom repeats, intensifies, devours you. Listen to it. Or get used to living as if nothing hurts. The form changes, but the void remains the same. From alcohol to work, from sex to food, from drugs to screens. The disguise doesn't matter, the pattern repeats. Seek relief, avoid silence, numb the soul. Every time pain tries to speak, another distraction arrives, another escape, another lie shaped like comfort. Because facing the shadow isn't pretty. It's raw, and it demands that you stop blaming the outside. Integrating what has been denied is neither comfortable nor fast. It's brutal. It's tearing off the masks that once helped you fit in. It's accepting what you had to hide in order to survive. Your failures, your wounds, your shameful desires, your rejected parts. It's looking at yourself without filters and asking the only question that truly hurts. Why am I still running away from myself? When that process begins, addiction stops being the enemy. It becomes a message, a symbolic signal that something inside needs to be heard. It's not about justifying the harm, it's about understanding the origin. What you don't face dominates you. What you recognize loses its power. Compulsion only exists where unspoken emptiness lives. Many people are running from an encounter that is still waiting. Abandonment, abuse, humiliation, absence. The body remembers, even if the mind has buried it. And each relapse is a desperate way to avoid that mirror. But the more you avoid it, the more it shows up in everything. In your distrust, in your anger, in the way you perceive a hostile world. The enemy is not outside. It's in the part of you that still hasn't been looked at. The shadow projects itself when it isn't integrated, and the cycle intensifies each time you deny its existence. But facing it isn't just a psychological act, it's spiritual, because it means recognizing that both light and darkness live within you, and that both are necessary to build something real. The mirror is not here to punish you. It wants to show you where you buried the gold, but you'll only find it if you dare to descend, with your eyes wide open. There lie the emotions you were never allowed to feel, the creativity that was suffocated, the sensitivity that had to hide to avoid being hurt, the personal power that fell asleep out of fear of judgment. Integrating the mirror means rescuing the essential parts of the self that were exiled, and that now cry out to be heard. The addict stops seeing themselves as broken and begins to recognize themselves as someone undergoing a deep transformation. The illness is no longer just a burden or a guilt. It becomes a door, a crack where the light enters. The path is neither straight nor clean. It's full of relapses, returning shadows, and unanswered questions. But when walked with awareness, the wound stops bleeding and begins to teach. Jung understood that the wounded mind doesn't need data. It needs meaning, a symbol, something that allows it to reorganize its way of existing, an experience that connects the internal story to something greater than itself. That's what restarts the soul, not the explanation, but the contact with the sacred, not in the institutional religious sense, but as something alive, genuine, and transformative. That spiritual dimension is not a luxury, it's a necessity, it's soul hunger. And when it goes unmet, the symptom repeats. The addictive impulse is often a distorted way of seeking the divine, not to escape the world, but to remember who you were before you broke. But searching for transcendence in substances leads to the opposite effect. Disconnection, fragmentation, emptiness. Real transformation begins when the symbol emerges, not imposed from the outside, but born from within. Like an image, a dream, a moment of revelation that rearranges everything. When the psyche feels seen, it reveals the map. And that map no longer points to repetition, it points to direction. That's why every culture created myths, rites, and archetypes to guide the processes of symbolic death. It's not enough to stop using. You have to die to the old identity and be born little by little into who you truly are. But that only happens when you truly surrender. And then the symbol speaks. Fire stops being just destruction. It becomes purification. Darkness is no longer a threat. It is a seed. It is the invisible womb where truth begins to grow. What once seemed like an eternal cycle now transforms into possibility. Therapeutic or spiritual guidance can help, but it doesn't replace the crucial moment, when the soul stops running, when it finally decides to listen. That is when alchemy begins. Silent, deep, real, not on the surface, not in theory, in the invisible. The story stops being a failure It becomes a right. The wound doesn't disappear, but it changes place. It's no longer dead weight. It's a guide, a symbol, a voice. Addiction, seen this way, is not just pathology. It's an attempt. Clumsy, desperate, failed, but human. It's a search disguised as a mistake. And failing doesn't invalidate the search. It makes it more urgent, more real. Only someone who has hit rock bottom knows what it means to rebuild without masks. Only someone who has seen themselves shattered can emerge with truth. And there, in that reconstruction, the symbol is born, not as decoration, as root, an image, a dream, a sensation that sprouts when the inner terrain is ready. It doesn't come from outside, it can't be forced. It only appears after enough tears have been shed, when the body has surrendered, when the shadow has been embraced and no longer needs to scream. Then, everything changes. Not just the habit, but the way of inhabiting the world. The addict stops defining themselves by the wound. They are recognized by their ability to transcend it, no longer seeking anesthesia, seeking presence, no longer wanting to disappear, wanting to belong. The change is the true rebirth. Pain becomes initiation. The shadow becomes an ally, and spirituality stops being an idea and becomes body, experience, living fire. It's not about going back to who you were. It's about being born into what never existed before. Because only someone who has crossed the abyss can hold the light without trembling. That void that once felt unbearable wasn't absence. It was space, a fertile space where something authentic could be born. Addiction, with all its shadow, was just a clumsy way of saying, "Listen to me." And when that listening happens, without judgment, without rush, without masks, the need to run loses strength. The impulse to disappear dissolves. What once looked like ruin becomes root. Because wholeness is not perfection. It's honesty, the ability to look yourself in the eye without running away. Healing is not forgetting what happened. It's recognizing that even in pain there was a seed of truth. Jung didn't offer formulas. He offered paths, so that each person could find their center. Because deep down, all addiction is a plea for meaning. And all healing is a reunion with the mystery of being alive. At that exact point where the wound no longer demands explanation and begins to reveal direction. If you've made it this far, write below, "I'm not running from myself anymore." Let it be written. Let it be sealed. Like if this touched a part of you you could no longer ignore. Share if you know someone who is still on the run. And turn on the bell. The next video may not be comfortable, but it will be necessary. See you in the next shadow. Or maybe not.